introduction. So I'm going to invite our panel of our three lovely panelists to join me now, and I'll get them to introduce themselves, and then we'll kick off. Fab. Oh, lovely. Right. So let's start with you, Haydn. Would you like to introduce and describe yourself, and then we'll just go around with the other two.
Morning, everybody. My name's Haydn Corrodus. I am a black man in my early 40s. I am wearing a white hoodie and a black hat with a paper plane on it.
Hmm. Can you just say a line about the kind of work that you do so people know
Yeah,
what
of
your
course.
experience is?
Sorry, yes. I'm a social media and digital marketing consultant. I've been working in arts culture now probably the last 8 or so years. I used to work for the Arts Council as a tech champion, and I've worked with multiple different arts and culture organizations in the UK. I currently live in America and in America. So I've got plenty of experience working in social and digital within the arts and culture sector.
Thanks, Haydn. Sam, to you, the same. Will you describe yourself and then do a bit of an introduction to yourself and your work?
Yes, no worries. My name is Samantha Thodhlana. I am a black female in my late 30s. I've got long brownish dreadlocks, a bit of red lipstick on today, and like a burgundy red jumper on. Yeah, and similar to Hayden, I've been doing social media, digital marketing for probably the last, yeah, 8, 9 years. And as a freelancer, I've been doing it for the last 6 to 7 years.
Mm.
And over the course of time beyond that, so I've probably worked in marketing and digital marketing for 14, 15 years. I've worked with everything from creative, education sector, public sector, health sector, arts and culture. Um, yeah, so I've got quite a broad range of
Oh,
expertise.
fantastic. Thank you, Sam. And Ned, hello. To the same to you. A description and then an introduction to your work would be great.
Brilliant. Hello, everyone. My name is Ned Potter. I'm a white male, 45 years old. I've got relatively short hair by my standards because I've just had it cut. I've got a short beard. I'm wearing a check shirt with sort of blues and reds in it. So I have a day job in an academic library where I do a lot of the marketing comms, and I do freelance work sort of one day a week. Done that for the last 15 years with various arts and culture and library organisations and the NHS and various other people as well around social media, marketing, presentation skills, and all that kind of thing.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So I'm just going to kick off with the first question, and I'm going to come back to Haydn to start with. And the first question we're going to ask is social media still worth your while? Haydn, what's your take on that, your position?
Yeah, 100% is still worth your while. Now, I can understand why there could be hesitation around it and like the change of algorithms and maybe understanding of what's the best practice and always trying to keep up to date. But ultimately, social media, I saw Gary Vee say, it, and Gary Vee can be, um, some people can love him, some people hate him. But in turn, when it comes to social media and digital marketing, he's got a very good beat on the pulse, a very good beat on understanding what's happening. And he said something recently where he said social media is no longer about social media, it's about interest media. And I found that really interesting because I think that is the best way to kind of really position social media in 2026. And if you look at it from the standpoint of interest media, arts and culture organizations have never been in a better position to take advantage of that because what that basically means is that if you've got five followers, 500,000 followers, if you're making content that is actually algorithmically interesting, that people are going to keep people interested in what you're doing, your content will be seen, your content will be served, because platforms want to keep people on their platform. So when you're scrolling through your Instagram page or scrolling through your TikTok page or wherever platform you may choose to be on, people are getting served content that the platform thinks is interesting to them. And you can control what that looks like by how you engage with content on social media, how you engage, the kind of content that you put out, the kind of things that you like, the kind of things that audiences find interesting. All of that is in your control. So I think in 2026, this is probably the best time to be on social media, the best time for you in terms of how to monetize it, the best time for you to try and get in front of audiences, the best time for you to start thinking creatively around how you tell your story in a time when there's so many different avenues for what we would call fake news or what we call disinformation wars or whatever that may look like. As a cultural organization, we're in a position to tell stories based on what's actually happened or tell stories in a creative way or to share insight that somebody might not have really considered because of the fact that we have those stories in a museum or in a theatre show or in a library. So I think this is the best time to actually be on social media for an arts and culture organization.
Somebody's asked a question, Haydn. She says, how they've said, how do I know if my content is algorithmically interesting? I can make content I think is interesting, but how do I?
That's the first mistake you've already made. The fact that you're overthinking the algorithm. Think about what's interesting about your subject matter. There's 5.6 billion people using social media. So I promise you there's 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million people who will find something interesting about what you're talking about. So you find the interesting element about your organization and you drill down on that and you test and learn and find out what's the interesting element about your organization, what's the storylines that you want to share. And it's not, it's an irritative, sorry, I can't speak this morning. It's a something you're going to have to continue to try. You trial and test it, but you will find that media, you'll find that happy space. And you've got organizations like the Sacramento History Museum who just talks about their print press, their history museum that focuses predominantly on their print press because of the fact that people find it interesting. There's the Wright Museum in Detroit, which has recently started creating content that is like a mini comedy or a mini sitcom. They didn't have a big following before they started doing it, and now they're getting millions and millions of views, and they started in January. So I'm saying all this to say is when you find that interesting element about your organization or that story that's going to be hold people's interest or that audiences are looking for, that's what you build upon. And there has to be a distinction between your online audiences and your in-person audiences and understanding that they're separate. Yes, there will be synergy between, but they're different audiences. So treat them as such. Give both the respect they deserve.
Okay, so saying treat as different audiences. I'm just going to say this out loud. So we've got absolutely bags of questions already, and we're not going to be able to get through them. So I'm wondering, audience, there's more and more coming, so many, but would you be able to help each other by sort of giving answers to things? And then what we'll have to do is pick out some that sort of feel like they're kind of summarizing some of the issues. So we'll do that as we go along. So please we can't answer all the questions as they happen. Thank you, Haydn. That's a really good start. Did you say that the Rights Museum or the Wright?
The Wright Museum. So it's the African American Museum. It's called the Charles Wright History Museum.
Right.
Yeah. So
like his name.
I'll put it in the chat.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much. Okay. Ned, the same question to you. Is social media still worth your while? And if so, why, from your point of view?
Yeah, I have to say, I love the question. I think it really speaks to the fact that some people are finding it really exhausting to keep up with trying to create content and work with the fact that the landscape is more fractured than it's ever been. It used to be relatively straightforward, and now it's very complicated, and the algorithms are ever changing. So I really understand why people are saying, "Is this actually worth our time?" I completely empathize with that. I still think it is, yes, and I think the reason is, there is simply no more direct route to get eyes on what you're doing than social media, even despite all the problems that it has. So if you think about, and I think part of the problem is that we compare ourselves to other social media accounts that are very, very successful. So if you make a video and you get 1,000 eyes on it, and then you see that another, arts cultural museum, whatever, has made a video with 10,000 views, you think, well, my video's not done very well. But I think that comparison doesn't really help us. I think it's useful to compare, how else would I get 1,000 people to see that same message any other way that wasn't social media? Could I get 1,000 people in a room to talk to them? Could I get 1,000 people to actually open a newsletter and read it? In those terms, social media it's incredibly useful for just being able to go directly to an audience. So I do think it is still worth it. And I think there's a really good question from JP. I need to hit a specific target audience local to our theatre, not a million people worldwide. How is the algorithm useful to me in that regard? And I think that's really interesting, because there are so many examples of social media arts culture organizations doing well that are sort of so huge as to become something that you can't really usefully aspire to, because they've just got these, they've hit something really, really good, and they've got these millions and millions of followers, and that's not necessarily what we're all trying to do. Sometimes we're just trying to build on a smaller level in a local community. I think about the thing about harnessing the algorithm. If you can do stuff that gets into the kind of algorithmically favored ways of doing things, then what you get is more of your own key audience finding out about your content because it's more likely to be surfaced to more people. You also get a sort of wisdom of crowds thing where when other people like it as well, it seems like it's got more kind of cultural heft and value because people see, oh yeah, they've all liked it, I'll like it as well. And you also, the more and more you build on, basically engagement leads to greater reach. So if you can get that greater reach, even from people beyond your local audience, then you're more likely to get engagement from your local audience. So it is worth it, even though I totally get what you mean about how, just reaching a bazillion people isn't necessarily useful to me if I'm just trying to get a local theatre off the ground. But yeah, I do think it's 100% worth your time. But I also understand why it sometimes feels like it's not worth the faff.
I think when we spoke before, you were saying to me that, kind of what else could you do that would get you
Right.
the impact, and that still is still the case, isn't it?
It is,
why
yeah.
wouldn't
I think that is the case, but I also think that, especially if you've been doing it for a while, it can sometimes be that platforms run out of a bit of steam, or the needs or your audience changes and starts to shift towards a different platform or a different way of engaging. And if you've had something that's worked really well for a long time, it can be really hard to leave it behind, even if the evidence is telling you that you should. So I think sometimes it's about saying, do you know what? For a long time, it was enough for us to be on Facebook and Twitter, and now Facebook is so hard to use without paid content.
No, it's
Obviously,
not.
oh, okay. Well, you can't come back to me on that. But what I mean is, if Facebook isn't working for you anymore, that doesn't necessarily mean that social media doesn't work anymore. It might be that there are other platforms that you could use more successfully. In my experience, you have more control over whether your content reaches an audience on, for example, Instagram than you do on Facebook, where you need a lot more kind of help from either communities or groups or from paying for the content. But I'm very willing to be shown to be wrong on that. So do tell me.
this Hayden, do you want to pick up that point? Because I can also see in the chat there's people saying I love it, I'm not so sure. So yeah, it's the
No,
two
it's not.
sides. It's interesting.
Yeah, it was first of all, Ted, apologies for that. That wasn't that, yeah. But it's not that I'm saying it's not Facebook's algorithm. First of all, I personally think you should stop overthinking algorithm. I think that's been one of our biggest issues. I think people are still trying to use social media like how it was 10, 15 years ago. Social media changes nearly every year. So the issue that we have is that we're still trying to use old tactics for a platform that is constantly evolving. Um, Facebook algorithm is very similar to Instagram's in the sense that if you're using reels and videos fly on Instagram on Facebook, like they really do. They just go really well. And if you've got an engaged audience and you can ask questions quite easily on Instagram, that will get you quite good responses. It just depends on how you use the platforms. You don't have to be on every platform. We've been through that before as well. It's just a case of, like I said, just find the interest. What do you like about your organization? What are the stories you want to tell? Now, somebody did give the example of, okay, I'm trying to reach local people. Then if you're trying to reach local people to get people into your theatre, to get into your shows, you have to think about the mix of content that you're putting out and the mix of stories that you're telling. And you can't just say, okay, I'm going to put this post up. I've got X amount of followers, so therefore people should now come to my show. That's not how any marketing works in any format. So there has to be that kind of groundwork and that like strategic think about how we position our storytelling. How are we making sure there's enough leeway so people can understand what our event is about, and that they feel that they're not competing with Netflix or competing with another show down there. You need to give people a reason to want to engage with you and come to your events, regardless of your size or the organization.
Okay. Ned, is there anything else you wanted to say on that?
Yeah, but I want to hear from Sam, so I won't say
Oh yeah.
anything.
Okay, smashing. Go on, Sam.
I love the fact that you want to hear from me. No, I was nodding to both of your points in different ways because I'm more of a build a community. I think it is about people's interests and core interests. And as an arts and cultural organization, building and engaging with your audience is due to that interest factor. And it's no longer about, I'm very off this whole algorithm thing. I don't really think about that now as much in my role. I'm very strategic when I work with organizations. It's who are you trying to engage? Why are you trying to engage them? Like, what's the purpose? What are you trying to achieve on your social media platforms? I'm also a believer of, I love social media, but you don't need to be on every platform either. Like it's I saw somebody's comment about it's exhausting. It's exhausting for me as a freelancer working in social media and digital marketing. I just don't feel like we have to be on everything because everybody says we should be on this platform, this platform. If it doesn't work for your organization, you don't need to use it. Use what works best for you. But I'm very much into, I think visibility is great on social, but it is about what are you actually using it for, and what are you trying to say? What work are you trying to share, or what message are you trying to share? And I'm a great believer in you don't need tens, thousands, millions of followers. You could have a community of followers on your page where it's like 1,000, but actually that 1,000 could be so engaged in your content, could comment, reshare, like, share within their networks as well, and things like that. That actually that community of followers serves its purpose, and it's not all about us trying to achieve tens of thousands and millions of followers, because sometimes that's not what your local organization is trying to achieve. So that's my perspective on it. It's social media is great, but actually it's not the same as it used to be 5 years ago, even 10 years ago. It's not all about algorithm chasing and how many likes you have on a post. I actually think it's great when you see people discussing your content, having conversations about what they've seen, talking about things more so than just liking a post now. I actually think it's social media is about how do we get people engaged so that they actually feel connected to what we're doing. So that's my perspective on that question.
So will you just carry on, Sam? So the next question really we were thinking about. So if we were talking, picking up on this thing about people trying to organise themselves, think about how they spend their time usefully. What are the sort of 2 or 3 bits of advice, best bits of advice you would give on how to spend your time effectively, or where you might, from your point of view, where would you concentrate?
Yeah, I mean, because I'm a freelancer, so sometimes I'm working with like 4 or 5 organizations at the same time, right? So I tend to find juggling. I'm sure there are a few freelancers here working in various organizations. Um, I'm one who also at times does feel quite exhausted and things feels quite tired, with certain things. So I think you have to really think, okay, what's my focus here? What do we need to focus on as an organization? So as a freelancer, I love going into an organization saying, right, what are you actually trying to achieve? Let's focus on maybe 1 or 2 platforms at a time and see what we can actually achieve from that first. And then we can see how things grow. Okay, and do them well. So focus on that 1 or 2, 3 platforms and do them well, not do 5, 6.
Right.
I had an organization, the other day going, oh, do we need to be on Blue Sky? Why? Why do you need to be on Blue Sky? Is there a specific reason? Oh, because everybody else is.
Yeah.
Everybody else moved from X to Blue Sky. Okay, well, no, that's not really the reason why you need to be going on to Blue Sky. Do you know what I mean? You've got other platforms that are doing really well. So I think it's all about intention and what you're trying to achieve from there, and just be consistent as well. I tend to find quite a few organizations will start something and then they'll think, oh, it's not reaching the right audience, or this is not working well, and they've probably only tried and tested it for a few weeks or a few months and already they've given up. I think you've got to be consistent in your content. Try something. If it doesn't work, try something else. And kind of keep going until you reach the audience that you're kind of looking to attract on there. And I always just say, I know Haydn mentioned about the offline and online kind of audiences being a bit separate. I think that was the comment, Haydn, about that. I do sometimes feel though that if you can engage well online, you can obviously convince people to come to all your stuff offline as well. So building that community of online audiences does often kind of engage people to then interact with what you're doing offline. So it can play that kind of two-way relationship as well. So I was just going back to that one point about that community. But yeah, focus on a smaller amount of platforms, do them well, and be consistent. That's probably some of my key advice.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Sam. Ned, what are some of the things that you think about? Bits of ideas or bits of advice that you give people about using time wisely.
I mean, I so agree with everything. Sam just said I was agreeing so hard during that. I like it's so much about intent and knowing what it is you want to get out of being on the platform in the first place, and then actually working towards that rather than just having a generalist approach where you just do a bit of everything on everything. I think part of it is about knowing what you need each platform for. And as Sam said, don't be on a platform if you haven't got a good use case for being there. It's better to do a smaller number of things well. But they do have completely different sets of ways in which they work well. They have different communities there. So for me, I use social media in sort of three distinct ways. I use it as myself as a sort of a freelancer and a librarian. And for me, Blue Sky and LinkedIn work really well for that because they are text based. They're conversational. I want to tap into an existing community and I want to share stuff and I want to hear stuff in that context. I don't find Instagram and TikTok particularly useful for me in that way. As a person working for my library doing marketing, I find Instagram to be the most successful platform for that because I'm trying to build a community there. I'm not just tapping into an existing one. I'm trying to build a following. I'm trying to influence people into having a better understanding of what we do and what the culture of the library is. And I find that Instagram is the right balance of pushing content out to new people, but also showing it to existing people. I also use social media as an artist, as it were, because I have a band. I play in a band, and it's a very niche band. We just do 90s dance music live, right? So for our band, if you're born between like 1985, 1975, something like that, you probably, if you like dance music, you're going to like us. If you're outside of that bracket, you might be completely baffled by the band, right? It's not a band for everyone because it's about 90s dance music. So for me, in that situation, TikTok is absolutely perfect because TikTok just pushes stuff out there. And there is a small subset of society who loves live 90s dance music. We just need to reach as many of them as possible. So it's not really about numbers of followers on that platform. It's about getting ourselves in front of like thousands and thousands of people's eyes. And since we've got on TikTok, the amount of demand that we have for gigs is more than we can cope with because it just, we just get stuff out there and loads of people hear about it and then they say, come and do the gig. So for me, those three different guises in which I'm using it, there is no commonality between the platforms. They all do different things and they work in different ways for what I'm trying to achieve. So I think one of the key things is trying to work out, I want to go from here to here, whether it's personally or organizationally or whatever. What are the platforms that are actually going to help me get from A to B? And then not worrying about trying to do all the rest of them if they're not going to help you get from A to B. Because I think a lot of non-profit marketing or arts and culture marketing falls down due to a lack of focus. And I think it's good to focus on some key areas and push that forward rather than trying to do everything and trying to please everyone.
Okay, smashing. Thank you very much. And Haydn, what would be your thoughts on that? How to use your time wisely?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what everybody says. You do have to have a clear understanding on the reason why you want to be on the platforms. I think the only thing I could probably really add to that is that content and storytelling is the key to every one of these platforms. Like that, each platform's algorithm wants you to stay on the platform. They don't want you to send people away from the platform. So you need to just think about how am I going to be adding value to the people who I want to see this content? What's going to make them say, okay, let me stop on this post over everything else that you're competing with on the platforms. So that's all I would think about. Just be more intentional about how each post adds value to your audience or the people who you want to see your content in the first place. How are they engaging with that with the things you put out? Are there other organizations or are there other people or are there other brands or influencers or content creators that are doing something within your space? What can you learn from them? What is it? Is it the way that is it a type of post that does really well? Some people think carousels perform really well, mixed media carousels perform really well. Some people it's videos, some people it's stills. There's so many different examples of success in every type of format, regardless of what it is, that you will be able to find somebody to learn from. And then again, going back to what Sam said, is it does come down to that consistency. Now, consistency, if you're going to trial a format, you have to give it some leeway. Now, you can see, when I mean leeway, you need to give it at least a quarter to see, okay, has this format worked? Has people have I given enough time for people to engage in it, to build on it? And then you have to make your own benchmark. So what I mean by that, you can't use the success of other organizations or of people around you as your benchmark. If you've only been getting arbitrary number 100 likes on your post, and now you're getting 150 likes, then you can say, okay, there's an improvement. You can do, there's a clear improvement. Now, it might not be the massive jump you're looking at, but you need to see where that improvement comes from and then dial down on that until it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and your audience gets used to knowing what to expect from your content.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just sort of ask the audience, is there, of all the questions that we've been asked, is there anything that you think we really ought to, I'm just kind of thinking, is there anything we should really pick up on at this point? Can I sort of go back to one of the questions we were asked in advance, which was about how do you were talking a lot about intention and sort of knowing why you want the platform. What if you're an organization that has maybe different perspectives, like there's the sort of the kind of, you might have a message that you want to get across, and you might be wanting to sell stuff, and you might have a kind of role or responsibility for, I don't know, mentoring or whatever. How do you mix those voices up? Sort of, I'll go back to Ned. You know, you talked about using different platforms in different ways. Can you have different voices on one? Can one person or one organization have different voices on one platform?
Yeah, I think it's quite healthy to have different voices on the platform. I think the trouble comes if you end up having no focus at all to the content, so it all feels a bit diffuse. So I think, you know, there are examples of. I was trying to think. There's so like an East London or arts organization I was looking at the other day on Instagram, and they've got a really good mixture of like the kind of audience voices and staff voices, and then just content about the actual organization itself. And but they've got like 3 or 4 things that come up in terms of thematically come up time and time again, rather than 58 different things, which is a bit too much. So I think it is possible to have that more than one voice. And also, I just want to pick up on one thing from the chat, which is people were talking about, can we have an example of a specific technique rather than a general approach? And something that I've found really useful recently in my professional capacity is something that Haydn just mentioned, which was carousels. So, you know, if you're on Instagram, you'll know that you can post more than one image or video at the same time in the same post, and that's a carousel. If you add music to this natively in Instagram itself, it essentially pushes it from the stills algorithm into the Reels algorithm, more or less. That's a simplification, but that's basically what it does. And whilst I agree in principle, we shouldn't be too hung up on the algorithm, there are certain techniques where you think, well, if this helps my type of organization get stuff out there, it's worth tapping into. I wouldn't want to be constantly looking at trends or hopping onto the latest thing, but for me, this is helpful because I find video content takes a long time to produce, and I've got loads of other responsibilities in my job, so I can't always do Reels for my library, but I know that they get a huge amount of reach compared to just a still image. So when you start doing carousels, this happened about 2 years ago, that there was a change, and carousels became essentially more popular with Instagram itself, and they like carousels more, right? So I've started doing still posts, but with music added in and with more than one image in the post. And now they get basically Reels-like numbers. You know, I'll get 10 or 20,000 people seeing my post, whereas I couldn't do that if I just posted one still image, and it's a lot quicker than making a video. So for me, that is an example of harnessing the algorithm in a way that it's just helpful to me. I'm not chasing it. It's not detrimental. I'm not getting in my own head about it. I'm just saying, well, here's a thing where it's going to help me with my time commitments to get something out there to more people than I would otherwise be able to do. It's the quickest way to get to multiple people. So I've started to do it more, and it's been really helpful. So I think that for me is when it's worth trying to work with the algorithm, rather than being completely like, I don't need to think about the algorithm at all, which I understand where that perspective comes from, but I think it can be helpful to tap into certain things that help you get particular types of message out there in a way that's conducive to be helpful to you.
Thank you very much. Sam, you were nodding. Have you got anything to add? Any thoughts on that?
No, I was nodding because, yes, I saw lots of comments in the chat section around, you know, tips and things like that. But there was a really good point made by one of the people in the chat called Sophie, who said, think of it strategically as well. It's not just about what are the specific kind of techniques that we can use, and we can all give you 3 and then you go away today and they're like your top. No, actually, you've got to be quite strategic. It depends what you're doing it for, what your organization is, which audience they're trying to. Strategies can be different for so many various organizations. And that's the thing as well. It might work for one, but it might not work for the other. So one strategy that I may give you today might work for one organization, but maybe another organization that doesn't work. I think that was just the only kind of comment I wanted to make. And then Ned's point about trying, carousels on one video. Yes, I found video content does work really well on various platforms. Even LinkedIn, which we haven't even spoken about, which is one of the core platforms that I use quite a bit now in some of with some of the organizations that I'm working with. It's actually LinkedIn. We don't use it for just the individual kind of CV style. Actually, I've seen quite a few organizations that I work with using LinkedIn as a way to collaborate, find opportunities, talk about kind of industry news in a way that they can engage new funders, new opportunities, find new partnerships and new ways of working. So, yeah, I think I just thought I'd point that one out as well. That there's that platform that we haven't spoken about, which I know a lot of people don't like because they think it's in the individual one. But actually, there's some really interesting ways of working on LinkedIn as well these days.
I
Thank
think
you.
with the format thing, I think you should look at what internal skill sets you have in your organization. So once you can just when you know what skill sets you have internally, that can help you decide what are the best formats for you to tell your story. All of these platforms, it doesn't matter. Obviously it does matter, but when you're first starting out, if you're trying to over focus on the algorithm, that's what gets people that tends to bog you down. And that's what tends to get you to feel that you're not doing anything, you're not achieving anything. If you're looking at the platform and saying, okay, in-house we have a team who can create carousels because they can create good imagery and they've got good stories, then maybe that's the way you focus because that's what the skill set you have internally. If you don't have the skill set internally to be creating videos and always be filming stuff like that, what will tend to happen is you'll make content that one doesn't probably fit how social media is currently being used, or two, if you don't enjoy doing it, you won't consistently build on it. So you need to be looking at, if you're looking for successes, look at what you're good at internally, where there's a skill set internally that you can build upon, and then frame your stories and frame your narratives and frame the message you want to get across around those formats. Look at the different platforms and say what platforms have but platforms best suit one, the audience we're trying to reach, and two, the kind of skill sets we have internally that we can create content to match that platform, and then you go from there.
And I suppose there's that whole thing about, people sort of talking about being exhausted, and if you're doing things that you're good at, that it gives you energy, doesn't it? Doesn't it's rather than the things that take energy away. Okay, and then but we've also sort of highlighting the idea you don't want to get stale and keep doing the same thing because you can do it. That's the other thing, isn't it? You want to kind of keep moving forward and learning for yourselves. Okay, so kind of the third question really is about when there's so much, you've already spoken about this, you're sort of you're creators in a world of creators. What are the ways in which you have either seen or have done or noticed other people really kind of cutting through and getting attention? I mean, in terms of arts and cultural organisations and artists. Sam, I'll come to you first. What do you think? Is there any sort of specific examples where you think people have done a really good job that you'd like to highlight? So, because just sort of think about some of the success stories, really.
Yes. Yeah, you've come to me first, haven't you, Linda?
I have. Do you want me to come back to you?
Come back to me. Come back to me. Let me think.
Okay. So Haydn's leaning forward, so I might pick up on him.
Sorry, no.
Because
Yeah, go on.
you mentioned a couple of museums
So
earlier.
yeah, so I put the Charles Wright Museum example in the chat already. But then you've got organized. So I'm based in America currently, so I see a lot of American cultural organizations. There's some libraries in America are killing it. Like the way libraries are really tapping into cultural trends, but not just catching into cultural trends and kind of meme culture, but they're doing it in a way that tells focuses on what their mission is as an organization, focuses on the stories, but just tapping into those kind of trends. They're doing really well. So there's a million different libraries, especially here in the US, that are really tapping into that kind of stuff. There's another organization called Made by Us, and it's called History Made by Us on Instagram. And again, they're another really good organization when you're looking at partnerships. So they do a lot of collaboration posts and they do a lot of carousels about history. They're a civics organization who work primarily with arts and culture organizations and talking about civics within the USA. But they tap into all these different culture organizations and do loads of partnerships with museums and stuff like that, which really helps amplify their messaging. So that's why I went back to when I was talking about earlier about finding the format that best works for you and tapping into that and figuring out how you can tell your story with that format. So those are just a couple that work really well. On TikTok, there's the American Ballet Theatre. They're brilliant on TikTok. So there's quite a few different cultural organizations who are doing different things in a unique way. We obviously all know about the Tank Museum at this point, about the success they've had on with their YouTubes and the way they are on TikTok as well. So there are examples, but I would also say take a look at arts and culture content creators. There's some brilliant arts and culture content creators who are creating some incredible content and really good storytelling, which there's no reason why we can't be doing the same thing as a cultural organization. There's one called The Gaze, as in so the gaze is in what you're looking at. He's incredible. He's a brilliant content creator who like, tells really fascinating story about arts, about art piece, about art itself. Um, so yeah, there's quite a few. I could build them off for a while.
It's just really helpful, isn't it, to kind of think who's doing a really good job here, not to try and say, well, we must leap on doing whatever if they're doing, but just to sort of give us a flavour. Sam, back to you then.
No.
From your world.
From my world, I was thinking I've got more kind of I work within the East and West Midlands within obviously in England. So I'm going to use examples from local kind of organizations I've worked with. And one is New Art Exchange, which is based in the East Midlands. And they're a kind of a community-led arts and culture organization. And I just feel like with them, what I feel is really good about what they do is they don't just focus on exhibitions happening or bringing people to their events and things like that. It's more around their content reflects their values and particularly around kind of representation and inclusion. And what they do centers around the people and the cultures around the East Midlands. So they look at various communities across the East Midlands and focus their content on what's happening on the ground. And it's very much kind of community led. They don't actually tend to put out much content around, okay, this exhibition is happening or this is happening. What I've seen happening with them, and when I've worked with them, it's that their content actually draws people in to then find out more about them and what they're doing, because they don't think of it as this is just like a selling tool. They think about it as this is our social media platforms are actually a community driven tool, and it's about the storytelling of the people in the community and on the ground. So that's just one example I've seen in East Midlands. Again, similarly, Birmingham Hippodrome, I quite like them. Again, I don't think their focus is around, we know they do lots of shows. We know they do, we know they've got brilliant stuff happening, but actually quite a lot of their content, again, highlights the people and the communities around them. And a lot of the stuff that they share are around the community programs that they're doing and the behind the scenes activity, and not just the bigger shows that are out there that they're putting on. So again, I think it's about organizations like this promoting that community spirit and highlighting the people and the participation of the communities that they're trying to attract, which therefore then makes those communities feel more connected to that organization. So they're my examples. I can go on and give more, but yeah, there are a couple of
Thank you very much. And Ned, from your point of view, thoughts on kind of who you think or ways in which you think you can sort of generate impact and cut through?
Yeah, I mean, for fundamentally, there is such an almost infinite amount of social media that you have to do something with a bit of character and personality to cut through the white noise. If you just do the stuff that people do, it just becomes wallpaper. So I think it's about taking a position, and you can decide what that position is. You don't have to do what anyone else has done. You don't have to be deliberately like provocative, or you could be. It's up to you. But the fact is, you've got to do something where you're like, this is who we are, and I'm going to trust my audience to appreciate that, even if other people don't, rather than just we're going to be generic and try and get as many sort of people half-assed interested as possible, because that's not going to do anything. So I'm interested in the organizations that do something where you're like, this is who we are. So I'm going to I've pasted in like 4 usernames into the chat of people I think are interesting in this field. So one is an artist, Abel Salautwi, who's a South African cellist, and he combines like traditional like African folk singing with like classical cello in a really unique way. He's unbelievable. But his social media account, specifically his Instagram, is a really good mix of, sometimes it's beautiful footage from like concerts, sometimes it's photographs from concerts, sometimes it's just someone obviously with a camera phone and he's just playing in a room. Sometimes it's the more corporate stuff that's saying, here's an interview with me in a magazine. But he's got a really good mixture of keeping on coming back to the central thing, which is, this is me and this is what I do and who I am. That's amazing. The Ashmolean Museum is interesting because they don't really do much about the museum. They just try and tell the stories of individual objects. So their feed is not like beautiful, shots of like, here's what the cafe looks like, here's what the how we're curating stuff. It's just like, here's an object and we're going to tell you the story of it in the caption. And there's a bit of a myth that no one reads the captions in Instagram, but they do, and they're a really good example of that. So I like that they've taken that position. That's what they've decided to do. So Mona Museum, which is Museum of New and Old Art, I think it is. They're a Tasmanian museum, and they are just, for want of a better word, they're such a vibe. They are so, everything about they've just, I mean, to have a look, they've got a sort of a counterculture attitude, and everything's incredibly stylish. They really don't seem to give a damn, and they've just got this kind of we are against the mainstream kind of feel to them, which again is just such an interesting position to take. Not saying that everyone should have that position, it's just it works really well for them. And the last one I wanted to highlight was Delphina, because Delphina are their bio is, we facilitate artistic exchange, research and production through residencies. So if you can imagine, they're kind of trying to get like poetry and cultural stuff done through residencies. That's not a visual thing that's very easy to market on Instagram, but they do a really good job of it. And all of their reels are just open calls for their residencies. And so they're not even really videos. They're just the word open call, but done as a video, because that's more likely to reach more people than the stills. And then the stills are about stuff there are other stuff that they're doing or stuff that's happening at the residencies. So if you're looking for a residency that Delphina do, it's super easy, because you just click on the Reels tab and you go straight there and you can just peruse all the stuff that they've got. Again, it's just a really like considered, like going right back to what Sam said at the start, intent. The intent is there of, this is what we do, this is who we are, and this is how we're going to express it. We're not trying to please everyone. We're not trying to reach everyone. We're going to go after our target audience and try and really to delight them. And I think they all work really well in completely different ways, and they're all very different organizations. So I recommend checking out all 4 of them. And just one other thing, I work in libraries, and Orkney Libraries has been mentioned in the chat. And if you ask 100 librarians, who's your favorite social media account, they'll say Orkney. If you ask 100 non-librarians, who's your favorite social media account in libraries, they'll also say Orkney, because Orkney are absolutely brilliant. But this goes back to one of the early comments about, I don't want to reach millions of people on social media. I just want to get my community theatre to the right people. Orkney are brilliant, but they do something that's very unique. They've got an island that they serve. Their actual customers, or not, I don't like the word customers in this context. Their patrons, whatever you want to say, as maybe like 4,000 or 5,000 people, but they've got hundreds of thousands of followers, and they are famous around the world. And they can therefore produce content that satisfies those global followers. And they don't necessarily need to spend so much time on their own local community, because it is really specific and quite small. What they do is brilliant, but what they do isn't necessarily something that I would aspire to for my library, because I could go out there and just do like I could try and do some like, loads and loads of meme content. I could try and do some generic funny stuff about libraries, and that could work quite well, but it wouldn't necessarily do what I'm there to do, which is to drive the behavior of my students and staff at my university towards using the library. So, and I've hoped this doesn't sound like I'm slagging off Orkney, because I think they're brilliant. I absolutely love them, but I think it's really important to choose inspiration that we can actually aspire to, that is trying to achieve what we're trying to achieve or something similar, rather than just choose someone who's doing really well and think, oh, we should do that, because they might not have the same goals as us, or they might not be serving the same community as us. So I think it's really interesting to look at a whole load of different options for inspiration and pick the ones that mesh best with what you're doing, rather than just the ones who are doing the best, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Just before we get into the last section, I was just going to go back a little bit and look at some of the questions we were asked earlier. And I'm going to ask Haydn about this one. So this was saying, how do you, it's a question of sort of ethics that this came up, sort of the people sort of grappling with the ethics of social media, shall we say. How do you separate your feelings against big tech? And you'll know why I'm picking this up. How do you separate is the question, how do you separate your feelings against big tech versus knowing you've got to market your work and art? And then it says, the ethics of social media is coming up more and more in my conversations, and I'd love the panel's reflection on how they navigate this in their work.
So my POV on this is every single medium has had the same question asked about it. Film, music, any way that we found to communicate will always have the same ethical questions asked about it. As a society, like I said, culturally, like I said, there's 5.6 billion people using social media. So where, yes, we see the ethical issues of the tech bros who are using them and our viewpoints on them, and that is a whole different conversation. We also see the same thing in TV. We also see the same thing in some of our cultural institutions, if we're going to be really honest about it, and especially some of the bigger ones who have had legacy leaderships. So the question then comes down to, what are we trying to achieve on the platforms? As much as social media can be seen as a negative, and there's all these negative stories, I can give you, for every negative story you have, I can give you a million positive stories about the impact that it's had, on. The fact that there's three of us in this conversation right now talking to you about this is because we've been able to build careers off of the back of using social media. I would have no career. I would have no way to make money if it wasn't for the fact that, or earn within the sector, if social media didn't exist. There's so many different ways for us to how we choose to use this tool. It's up to us how we decide to use this tool. But it is still ultimately a tool. Now, the ethics of the people who own it, that then comes down to, do we then stop using all of the TV programs, channels that we use? Do we then start going against some of the broadcasting organizations that we use? Do we stop talking to the media outlets and the newspapers? This is not to conflate and to dismiss it, but I say that to say that every single one of medium has the same issue, and the issue isn't the platforms, it's us as a society. If we're going to be brutally honest, it's when we held the mirror to ourselves, what do we want to see? And that's what keeps and get reflected back at us through some of these feeds.
Thank you. And so I noticed that there was also that kind of whole conversation here about X and being on X and not being on X, which sort of feeds into that, doesn't it? It's a panel. We've got 10 minutes left, and I'm going to sort of think about, where would you focus your time? What do you think, what would you be advising to do more or less of? We'll get to that question, but I just wonder, is there anything that any of you would really like to say to the audience that haven't given you a question that would allow you to do that? Ned, go on.
If I just pick up on the ethics,
yeah.
I do think it's interesting. I think the important thing is that we have to sort of do the hardest thing, which is to not take a blanket position on ethics. I think we have to take individual positions on ethics based on what we're doing, and that's really hard work and it's exhausting. But I think for me, it's about saying, where is the line? And some people will say, well, if you're going to go off X because it's ethically problematic, where do you draw the line? And for me, the important thing is just to draw the line somewhere, and you can decide where to draw it. So for me, I got off X organizationally and personally 2 years ago because that is beyond the line for me. It's a place of fascism. That Meta is hugely problematic, but for me at the moment, despite the fact it's hugely problematic, I'm still there, and I'm constantly balancing everything that you would expect us to balance, which is what the morals versus the opportunities versus the reach versus the community and all that kind of stuff. But we do have to take a position based on having thought about it, rather than just say, I'm going to say no to everything because they're all evil, or I'm going to say yes to everything because it's all flawed. So what can you do? So my position.
That's not the argument, though. It's just the argument. The argument is not if that everything's flawed, so therefore you don't do it. The argument is simply what you said. If your organization has a position, that position has to be seen throughout everything. You can't pick and choose when that position suits you, and then that position also tends to come up because we're reflecting who we are as people, and not what the organization is actually doing. And those two things are different. They're different standings. Like who you are as a person and what you believe in as a person is different for what is needed by your cultural organization. So you need to just, if you're a person who wants to say, okay, I just don't want to be involved in any of these kind of things, you then have to reflect what that looks like for where you work. And does your organization share those ethics and share those morals? I'm never saying to you that you can't only be, you should, everything's bad, so don't worry about it. That's not the point. But the point is that we are very subjective about, who Chris Rock did a show recently about selective outrage. We have a lot of selective outrage about when we select our outrage. And the example I always give is the same with X. I haven't been on X for years, but the example of X is it's a fascist with a lot of fascism and stuff like that. Substack has exactly the same issue. Nobody left Substack because it wasn't blown up to be, it didn't become a big news story, it didn't become the thing of the day. So it's about you being honest and being morally honest about where you position and where the organization is positioned, and then you build accordingly.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. We wouldn't be on Substack for the same reason. As I say, it's just about saying be honest about what your position is and where you want to be. And that, as you say, that is different. Organizationally might be different to personally. You've got to balance that up. But I think the important thing is to have that conversation, even if it's just with yourself, about where you want to be.
Yeah. Somebody's one of the comments in the chat is just saying, I think this is what we should have been talking about, this whole the kind of the underlying questions of it all.
Very interesting.
It is interesting. I'm not noticing the time, so we've just got 5 minutes left. And I had said to you, is there anything more that you wanted to say to the audience that I haven't put? Does anybody have? Just put your hand up if you have anything you'd really want to say to the audience that you haven't had a chance to say so far.
Not, I've seen a post here that says the algorithm suppress the content that people who made the algorithm don't want to see. Again, I don't think that's true. And the reason I don't think it's true because I follow a lot of lot of that information. So my algorithm is full of news about politics, about about the things that are happening in the world. That's all my algorithm is about because that's all I engage with. Your algorithm is literally, if you spend a week on your algorithm liking cat videos and only looking at cat videos and only liking cat videos when they come out, I promise you, next week you're all that's all your algorithm's going to be. That's all you're going to see is cat content. Your algorithm is based on what you search in real life and what you engage with in real life. That's just what your algorithm shows. That's what it shows you. It's interest, like you said, it shows you your interest.
Interest. Back to the beginning again. Okay, thank you. So what? So if we just to sort of finish up, then, what would be the things? Would you? I don't want to say advising, but kind of where are you thinking about putting your energies and efforts in terms of social media to the panel in sort of going forward? Sam, where will you be putting your energies?
My energies, sorry, I've just been distracted with the chat, with lots of stuff that's being said about the chat. No. Where will I be putting my efforts? I think I'll be putting my efforts in understanding the difference, and this is going back to the ethics a little bit, between personal versus professional. I think I need to get a better balance of that. What my personal thoughts, beliefs, and what I'm interested in versus my professional and some of the organizations I work with and what their beliefs, values, and thought processes are, and trying to understand the difference, because I think it sometimes gets a bit blurred, especially when you're a freelancer. So I often don't like to try and go in too much with my own personal thoughts about platforms and things like that, and actually let the organization tell me what their thoughts, values are. And if they're not really aligned to me fully, maybe I might walk away if it's my line. So that's me, but I think I need to do better and learn from that. Again, I think do things with intention. As I said it from the beginning, I think I need to learn to do things better with intention. And the organizations I work with, spend more time letting them test, trial, do things with intention. If it works, it doesn't, we start again, and just having that flow. And somebody asked about a platform, which one I would choose and focus on. I'm sorry, I'm going to say LinkedIn. It's out the box, but I'm going to say focus on that, because that's the one that I'm focusing on quite a lot at the moment. And I'm finding it very useful for collaboration and just a lot of partnership working with several of the organizations that I'm working with. So that's my bit. because I know we're running out of time.
We are. We've just got a couple of minutes. Haydn, to you next. Where are you focusing your energies?
From a personal standpoint, LinkedIn is my be all and go all. It's my favorite platform by a country mile. From a working standpoint, TikTok is still probably the one I use the most. TikTok and YouTube are the ones that I concentrate on the most.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ned, what about you? Where are you? Where would you be putting your energies? What sorts of things are you doing?
I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, that in my three different sort of hats, it's three different platforms. I do think that I would shout out Blue Sky just because it's such a small platform compared to the other ones we talk. It is, it's like a millionth of the size of YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, but there are a lot of cultural, artistic, freelancer, charity type people who are in this kind of environment in the webinar today. There's a lot of those people on Blue Sky. So if you want to be in a community that talks about this stuff, not necessarily as a place to market your organization, but to talk to other people doing that kind of thing, I think Blue Sky is a good place to be, even though it is tiny. It's one of those things where it's very niche, but if you're in that niche, it can be useful. So that for me is a thing on a kind of personal level. And I'll still be doing Instagram primarily as the library, because that's the most useful for community building, and TikTok primarily as the band, because that's the most useful for generating new audiences for the gigs.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Right, I think we're just about out of time now. That was an absolute romp through, wasn't it? It feels like we've kind of gone all around the place and back again. So I wanted to say thank you so much to our panel for sharing your thoughts, your ideas, and your sort of positions on things. And thank you all audience for a sort of very lively debate, loads of questions. We haven't answered them all. I think, in a way we've asked as many questions as we've answered. So